So a major financial change is occurring in the global financial system. Governments and financial institutions describe this change as modernization, efficiency, or digital innovation. In reality, this gradual shift of money, markets, and ownership records into centralized digital systems. These systems make assets visible in real time, programmable by policy and subject to rules that can change without the consent of the owner. Understanding this process is essential, I believe, for anyone who wants to maintain control over their assets and plan for the future. Having already considered much of the reset from a theoretical perspective, this evolving playlist shifts the focus to action. Of course, none of this is financial advice. My aim here is simply to empower you with information, help you see trends early, take steps to resist if you wish to do so, and push back where possible. The odds may be steep, but I prefer a stance of informed action over passive acceptance. This video is a practical guide for recognizing early warning signs and taking action before options close. It focuses on three key principles: clarity, agency, and leverage. By paying attention to the right signals and acting decisively, I believe you can protect your assets and influence the course of this transformation. So why should you care? Three clear reasons, I believe. First, boomers hold the largest pool of pre-digital wealth. Second, the timing lines up perfectly with the largest wealth transfer in history. And to be clear, the wealth that will be taken will not enter the real economy again. Third, once you're in, there is no realistic exit. This isn't inevitable, but without concentrated vigilance and active resistance, it seemingly is. And to that end, perhaps this is the kick up the backside that humanity needs to actually live more intentionally and take back our own power. So the first area to monitor is the legal and regulatory environment. Laws define what ownership means and how assets are recognized. When property, securities, or cash are redefined in digital terms, the ground beneath traditional ownership begins to shift. Key signs to watch for include amendments to property laws, securities legislation, or land registries that remove recognition of paper records. Governments may announce sunset dates for older systems, signaling that legacy methods of ownership will no longer be valid. When legislation formalizes digital representation as the standard, it becomes essential to take steps to maintain control. Practical actions include securing legal ownership of assets in ways that remain independent of centralized digital systems. This can mean holding property or other assets with paper deeds in jurisdictions that still recognize physical titles, keeping physical stores of value such as cash or precious metals under your control, and structuring investments through private contracts or trusts in jurisdictions that actually resist digital registration. It's worth monitoring local and international legal developments to anticipate shifts that could force digitization, and AI can be very effective in finding out where this is taking place and how. Where possible, act before mandatory digital conversion takes hold and diversify holdings across different jurisdictions to preserve true agency. These steps are not theoretical, they are the means to maintain leverage and options as the digital financial reset unfolds. Financial institutions often move ahead of legislation. Banks, retirement funds, and central securities depositories introduce digital or tokenized products early. Government land registries may plan or pilot blockchain systems. These are not minor experiments, they are the foundations of what is becoming the new system. You can certainly gain insight by tracking procurement announcements, pilot programs, and official communications from financial institutions. When incentives such as preferential interest rates, bonus yields, or fee waivers are offered for using new digital systems, it often signals that infrastructure is ready for adoption. So be wary of this. Action steps to include here diversifying assets outside centralized digital systems. For example, instead of holding all cash or securities in banks, moving towards digital control, maintain physical cash, precious metals or private equity in slower adopting jurisdictions. For some, it may be worth exploring private contracts, cooperatives, or trusts to retain independent ownership. Build community. Exchange networks such as local barter systems, mutual credit arrangements, or cooperative savings groups that operate outside banks and digital identity requirements. These increase liquidity and collective resilience. Monitor institutions closely, track central banks, retirement funds, land registries and banks for new digital mandates, pilot programs or incentives which are tied to digital adoption. Early signals allow you to move and adjust holdings or reinforce legal protections accordingly. Acting early across these fronts preserves choice and control, ensuring you are not forced into the digital systems and can maintain independent financial agency. As we discussed in the first video in this series, digital identity is becoming the key to accessing financial services and property. Governments and banks increasingly require verified digital identity for transaction. When this becomes mandatory, it really does signal that capture is in a mature stage. So look for requirements such as biometric verification, app-based authentication, and government benefits delivered exclusively through digital wallets. Countries with advanced digital identity programs can provide examples of what to expect. Protect agency maintain offline records of key assets and use alternative identity mechanisms where legally permitted. Consider relocating assets to jurisdictions where digital identity requirements are optional. At the same time, be mindful about what personal and financial information you share through your smartphone or other connected devices. Live more intentionally when it comes to actually interacting with these useful yet highly insidious devices. These strategies may help create time and options, allowing you to retain control before full enforcement of digital systems occurs. Policymakers often create conditions that push asset owners towards new systems. These can include new taxes, changes in capital gains treatment, or adjustments in interest rates to force sales. Property tax increases, cash reporting requirements, and other policy changes also encourage movement into digital systems. Actions to consider here, well, moving vulnerable assets into less targeted classes, convert some holdings from easily tracked digital accounts into physical gold, silver, or cash in secure locations. Consider artwork, collectibles, or private business equity that is harder to tokenize or monitor. My dad always loved classic cars, Jaguar E-types and XK140s. At the time I thought he was quite mad, but there's method here. Consider creating liquidity buffers. Keep a portion of funds in cash, foreign currency, or stable assets outside mainstream banks to cover urgent needs without triggering mandatory digital conversions or sales. You may also explore alternative investment strategies such as international real estate, agricultural land for heirs, cooperative enterprises, perhaps even peer-to-peer lending networks or private trust structures. The push toward digital control is global, but these options can help maintain returns, preserve tangible assets, and protect some degree of autonomy for your descendants. The way in which digital transformation is discussed matters. Governments and central banks often frame tokenization as essential for efficiency, inclusion, or fairness. Traditional assets may be described as outdated, risky, inefficient. You can exercise influence here by participating in conversations. Such conversations could take place online on social media and support public campaigns that provide alternative perspectives. Building networks with like-minded individuals and communities helps maintain options and slows unwanted adoption. By shaping the narrative locally, we can increase leverage over the decision-making process. The technical features of digital systems are often the most decisive signals of capture. These include rules embedded in asset documents, terms of service, restrictions on transfers to improved networks, and conditions for receiving incentives or tax breaks. Once these controls are in place, options for independent action narrow. You can respond by avoiding assets bound by programmable rules, relocating high-value holdings outside restricted systems, and negotiating terms where possible. Maintaining physical stores of value, which we've stated throughout this video, such as precious metals or cash, ensures that you retain agency even as digital controls expand. Early signals of capture often appear in international agreements before domestic enforcement takes place. Organisations such as the Bank for International Settlements, the Financial Action Task Force, the International Monetary Fund, and the G20 coordinate policies that influence national law. All of this is simply far too much for me to keep up with, so perhaps consider joining me on X so we can all engage in uncovering such developments. Tracking announcements, policy statements, and cross-border agreements gives advance notice of what is coming to your jurisdiction. This sort of information allows you to plan asset movements and legal strategies ahead of time, preserving leverage and options. Exit routes from digital control close in stages. High-value cash is clearly being restricted first, likely followed by cross-border transfers, controls on private registries, and finally limits on precious metals and physical assets. Recognizing this sequence allows you to prioritize action and maintain flexibility. A clear monitoring system helps determine when to act. When 3 or more warning categories are active that we've considered in this video, early capture is definitely underway, and it is time to implement pre-planned asset strategies, narrative influence, and legal protections. Now, a systematic approach here increases effectiveness. Regularly track legislation, institutional announcements, and procurement notices. Monitor central banks, land registries, and securities regulators. We must be vigilant of their behaviour. Follow international organisations to anticipate domestic adoption. Maintain a simple scoring system to evaluate triggers across categories. Now I'm going to place the content of this video on my Substack via a PDF, which may be helpful for this. The link is below. Now when the system reaches thresholds, execute planned actions to protect assets, influence decision, and maintain your options. The digital financial reset is reshaping the way money, markets, and ownership are controlled. Early recognition of warning signals allows individuals to retain control over assets, influence outcomes, and protect wealth for future generations. But this requires action. By focusing on legal and regulatory changes, infrastructure developments, digital identity integration, engineered liquidity events, policy narratives, control layer indicators, and international signals, you can act with clarity, agency, and leverage. Currently, the window for meaningful action remains open. But once assets enter fully programmable digital systems, resistance becomes limited to behavior within the system. By monitoring signals, planning contingencies, and engaging with local and international processes, individuals can protect assets, preserve autonomy, and exercise influence over the pace and nature of this transformation. Now, thanks so much for joining me. Do check out the video earlier in this playlist or the theoretical videos underpinning the financial reset here. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye.